Hello, this is May 7th, 2020. This is Elizabeth Finlayson of the Nonprofit Coach, and today we're going to be covering fundraising in a crisis with updated research. So very timely for the moment, and we're going to jump in and get started. Okay, so I am Elizabeth Finlayson, the nonprofit coach, lead coach, and my mission is to create a fairer, more equitable, and inclusive world filled with empathy and beauty. My team and I do this by supporting our nonprofit clients with strategic planning, fundraising training, and support. Okay, so I want to jump in and actually talk about what is going on right now. And, Nancy, you're on the line with us today. Anybody who is here can ask questions. So feel free to stop me in the middle of this. There's just a lot that I'm wanting to cover during this time.
Okay.
So I don't know, have you seen this going through the internet at all? This was
No, I
created
haven't.
by a collaboration between Jeff Brooks Fundraising and the Better Fundraising Company. And it's interesting. So this is a prediction, and the people that I know who brought it to my attention were coaches at Network for Good. And no one that I know is willing to say, oh, this is for sure what's going to happen. We don't know what kind of research or data is underlying this. We were pretty sure we were already in a bump. We were seeing growth week after week after week. At Network for Good, where I am a coach, we've seen that organizations that have been with us for 3 years or more have seen a 90% increase over this time last year who are getting coaching. So we definitely were seeing that bump or surge going on. But what we were also seeing is starting before Giving Tuesday now is that was beginning to decline. And I think it's not surprising. The way that dollars were coming in was really similar to the way you would see right after a natural disaster, except at that time, usually what you'd see is about a 5 to 7 day major spike and then a drop down. And we were not seeing that. We were seeing it going up and up and up and up and up. But starting last week, we were starting to see it going back down. We saw a big increase over Giving Tuesday now. I think that was. I want to say a little more than 50% of what we saw at Giving Tuesday in the fall. That's pretty unheard of for April. So that's great. And we anticipate that we're going down into a slump right now. So I think for people to understand about a slump, it does not mean it's time to stop. So I think that's one of the things that it's really important that people understand is that communication is more important than ever. And if, for example, you're an organization that is receiving less resources because maybe your event was canceled, if it's harder for you to do your programming, to keep asking. Don't, a lot of people are like, should we fundraise during this time? People got the message we should, and then they're like, should we still fundraise in this time? The answer is yes, but you want to do that within the mix of a broader level of communication. So you want to be communicating pretty regularly about stories about your organization across multiple channels. Your ask at most should be about 25% of those communications, and that's at most. So, put it in a media diet is what I like to talk about. Then we know that eventually there'll be a surge. No one I know wants to say that's going to happen in 4 months, because what we don't know with this virus is the timing around testing, the timing around vaccines, any second waves that are anticipated, or whether states want to just stay open even if people are dying because of the economic toll. We don't know any of those things. And so it's very hard to say, oh yeah, everything's going to be great in 4 months. It could be great and then we could shut down again. I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't know many people who do. But I think that we do know that at some point, whether it's in 4 months or in 4 years, there will be an increase. And we know from the last recession, the organizations that continue to communicate with their donors and continue to ask with their donors did better than the ones who backed off and stopped communicating. And the thing is, why do we back off and stop communicating? It's because we're trying to be respectful of our donors. But I said this in the last seminar like this, that the way donors took that last time was that we only cared about them when we wanted money, and then we stopped communicating. And so we really don't want to be lumped in with that. Okay. I'm going to ask you, Nancy, do you have any questions before I move to the next slide?
I don't right off. I mean, I am surprised that so many people saw a jump. And was it specifically where they had a COVID related messaging, or was it just in any general group that saw an increase at that time?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, what we've been seeing is giving increased across all sectors across the country. So, not just health related, but yes, I think it does make a difference to um, couch your messaging in what's going on in the broader context of COVID. Like, is it making it difficult for you to do your programs, or I know you had to cancel your event at your
Right.
organization. So those kind of messages are really helpful. But I think, there's other best practices like communicating leading up to Giving Tuesday now, communicating during that day. Yes, and I think those are some of the things that I think make a difference in whether people saw increases.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, every organization is different. So I know people who are really cheering about, what would be a smaller set of donations for somebody else. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we did have a good Giving Tuesday yesterday, or Tuesday. Uh, so, I mean, and
that's
it was
great.
like you said, it was probably about half of what we did in the fall, maybe a little less than half, but around there.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. So as I said, giving is up about 90% looking April to April. So April of 2019 to April of 2020, but those are for organizations at Network for Good that have been working with them for 3+ years in coaching. And I think what we're just saying is that like there was a lot of best practices being followed, people were ready, their databases were up to date. So, for your question around this, Nancy, if you're looking at your April and you take out your event, you might find that you're similarly up. But I know normally you'd be having your event at that time.
I'm muted. It was today, actually. We were having it, but we're not.
Oh,
So,
yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. That's so challenging. And, I think I do want to do one of these sessions specifically around virtual events and other kinds of event fundraising. So let me know if that's of interest and that can be a focus. So let's talk about types of giving that work right now and why. So from my experience, this will unfortunately be my third recession fundraising through. I started my fundraising career a few months through September 11th. And one of the big takeaways I learned during particularly the last recession was that individual giving is really just one of the most resilient forms of giving. Foundations, they are great sources of income because they have a pot of money. It's their job to give it away, and they give you instructions about how to do that. So, in some ways, it's really, really helpful. But the thing is, they're required to give away 5% of that pot of money. And when the stock market goes down, that 5% gets a lot smaller. Now, some foundations will make the choice to dip into that larger pot of money and go above 5%, 6%, 7%, something like that. In order to maintain their giving, but not every foundation is either able or willing to do that. And so that's one of the reasons why that isn't as great during a crisis like this. Also, corporations, their job is to be self-interested, and so they're going to do what's best for their shareholders and their bottom lines. So what I've seen working in organizations, starting when I worked at a blindness organization, is, people taping quarters onto a piece of paper saying, I'm retired, this is just my little bit of income, I want to give this to you. Or, during the last recession, I was working at a theater and people would say to us, I've cut back on a lot of things, but this is the one thing I'm still doing. Here's your gift for the year. And so I think that kind of loyalty really can only happen from individuals because entities act like entities and people act like people. And so if you look at these other things underneath it, they're really all forms of individual giving. One thing that we saw in the last recession is that while the average gift often went down, the number of donors went up. So monthly giving is actually a great way to be able to ask people. It feels a little bit easier, probably both as the asker and the person receiving that ask, because even if you have the resources, if you're feeling anxious about the economy or your job, being able to dole that gift out over a longer period of time might just be an easier sell. That just might be easier. And somebody might actually be able to give a higher dollar amount if they're breaking it out month by month, knowing that they can just cut it off whenever they want. So that's a really good one. And we do know now that people are willing to give monthly gifts starting on their first gift. We used to think that people had to give for a while and then they jump in. And what we find now is with people, with all the subscriptions they do with Netflix and things like that, monthly giving just isn't really that hard to sell for them. Looking back at the Great Depression, actually, some of our coaches dug up some information in Network for Good and found some research finding that during the Great Depression, planned giving went up. And for those of you like you, Nancy, who have an organization that's been around for a while, planned giving is a really great thing because it doesn't cost anyone anything just to make a simple bequest. There are types of planned giving that can be more complicated, but really just something like a simple bequest. And we're really saying that all organizations should make sure that they have plan giving information on their website, at the bottom of their giving pages, that is just something that's part of their ask messaging. And the other thing that's with that is make sure if somebody has said that they've put you in their will, that you've got that recorded in your database in some way and that you're treating those people like your major donors. It's really important because a lot of people change organizations out of their will because they don't feel like they've kept a relationship with them or that they're treated well. And I know on the staff side, it's a little bit hard sometimes to know, what do I do with this person who's said that they're putting me in their will? But I just say, treat them the way you treat your major donors because essentially that's what they are. You just haven't received the gift yet. And I think you can't go wrong doing that. So that's a really good one to focus on right now. And lots of people are updating their wills right now and looking at their own paperwork around end of life planning. So that's another
I
reason.
was I was just going to ask,
Yeah.
is it a little? I mean, is it a little different because this is a pandemic? Does it seem a little, I don't know, opportunistic to ask people to put you in their will when people are dying of this disease? It just seems maybe not a. It seems a little. I mean, it's nothing we've done before, so I think for us it would feel a little weird if we started doing that
You
right now
know,
during a pandemic.
I think people always feel a little reticent about putting plan giving information up. But the truth is, I was on a webinar training around plan giving, and they're just saying like people are thinking about this. It's not we're not surprising them with this death conversation. That people really are thinking about it and they're willing to have straight conversations with people. So I think it's a matter, one of the simplest ways is just having it available on your website as a page, having it at the bottom of one of your appeals. Just having it there, I think, is really helpful. And then also, I think when we're highlighting our major donors and we're talking about major giving, we can talk about plan giving at the same time. So if you're ever having a major giving conversation, talk to them about major or plan giving. That actually just might be um, an easier gift for them, to just say, great, I can do that right now. And I don't really have to do very much else around that. And I don't have to make a physical gift at this moment. So just something that's there. Donor advised funds we've talked about before. So donor advised funds have the reputation of being great in a crisis because people put those funds together when they have those funds and they're only for donating. So it's a pot of money that's sitting there no matter what. And so one of the things that I'm recommending with people is to go through your donor list. One of the only ways you might know if your donor has given from a donor advised fund is it might be on a check that they gave you or you received a little bit of paperwork with a gift. go back through your paper records if you've kept them, and find out who those people are, because those are people you should be continuing to have major giving conversations with. I didn't put it on here, but I actually should mention it now, is that stock gifts are cheaper for the donor than cash gifts. And there might be people wanting, hi Dave, to unload their stock gifts. So if somebody makes, let's say, a $10,000 donation, and we know they're going to save money on their taxes, if they give the same amount in stock, they save that money on their income taxes, as well as they save on capital gains. So what that allows is that either that donor can just make a cheaper gift, or they can actually even sometimes make a higher gift that costs them the same amount of money, simply by converting that to a stock gift. Now, I have heard people express concern about that, like, oh, it's expensive and time consuming to hold on to stocks. Don't hold on to them if it's expensive and time consuming. Sell them right away. I've definitely worked at organizations that have policies where they get sold right away.
Hey,
And if,
Elizabeth, I had a question a little bit
yes,
ago, but I was on mute by accident.
oh,
What's a donor advised fund or a
so
donor
it,
advised gift?
donor advised funds are often set up through other entities, like a community organization like Chicago Community Trust, or through like a wealth management, like Fidelity Charitable. And it is what it sounds like. So a donor can create a pot of money that they advise and say where that money will be donated to, and it just sits there. So it acts a lot like a family foundation. It can be, yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, and so it's great. It's just, they're just sitting there. So a lot of people are, so the people who are running a lot of these donor advised funds are telling their donors right now to take their year-end giving and bring it up to right now. So that's another reason it's really important for us to kind of keep asking. And it's funny, I'm trying to talk about what's right now, and then I've got all these tips about what to do, but I'm covering a lot of it right now. But really, it's just people are making gifts right now, and it's really important that we ask, because we do know we're going into a slump. We don't want to be missed by any of that. And then major giving tends to follow the stock market. We know the stock market is really volatile right now. Um, as with anything, all of our giving conversations have to be sensitive. We do need to be couching it in language around, not understanding where people's circumstances are. Hopefully, if you're meeting with a major donor, in that meeting, you are finding out where their circumstances are. If they tell you that they've lost a lot in the stock market or something like that, that's great information. Just keep up your relationship, and eventually something will happen. But there are plenty of people who are doing well. For instance, there are people who haven't lost their jobs and just got money from the federal government based on the number of people in their household, and maybe they're not spending money on transportation, and they're not eating out lunch, and they're not dry cleaning. So there's people who are actually doing better. I was just on a major group networking call this morning, and there were people who were like, oh yes, my business is down 40%, my business is down 90%. And there's people, they're like, I've never been busier, I'm being constantly called and working till 11 o'clock at night. And so every person's circumstance is different, and so we just want to be aware of that. And I think sometimes in our effort to be sensitive, we pull back and we don't ask anyone, and it just doesn't give them the opportunity to support our organizations. Oh, I didn't make a slide about this, but I actually just want to say this. So right now, if you ask charities or organizations, they are anticipating that they will have a major shortfall this year. So I think it's something between like 75 and 80% of organizations are saying we're going to have a shortfall this year. If you ask donors, 80% of donors are expecting to maintain or increase their giving this year. About a third of them are expecting to increase their giving. And so there's a real mismatch between what organizations are thinking are going to happen to them and what donors are saying they're going to do. And that's why, again, it's really important that we're having those conversations with our donors and allowing them to lead what they would like to be doing this year. Okay, and just stop and ask if there's any questions. Okay. The beauty of everyone being muted is nobody has questions. Just kidding. um, so I have this slide in here from the last time, and I just wanted to put this in to talk about fundraising channels and their effectiveness. So if you think about the way this pyramid is, at the bottom is the kind of volume of communication that's going on, but also as you go up this pyramid, that's where the real gold is in our fundraising effectiveness. So social media is something we do a lot of, and we know that it's really important. For instance, we know that peer-to-peer online fundraising through Facebook is now making up 3% of all online giving. That may not sound like a lot, but it actually is a pretty big increase. And we know that that's going to keep going up, for instance. But as you can imagine, that's still that's still 3%, and that's only online giving. As you go up, email is more effective than social media. These people have taken the time to give you their contact information or allowing you to have more direct communication with them. Above that, letters, direct mail is more effective. And then when you start getting into telephone and then in person, those are the most effective because those are really warm. You have an opportunity to tailor them to that individual person, to react to what's going on with them in the moment, their facial expressions, their body language, what they're specifically telling you about their circumstances. So you can imagine why those become more and more effective. You can also imagine you're not going to have an in-person meeting with every single person who donates to your organization because that would be incredibly time consuming. So we also know that we're a little bit stymied in some of this, particularly this in person. And so it's important that we find ways to connect with people right now. Again, as I talked about, individual giving is really important. It's actually 80 to 90% of the dollars given every year when you include outright donations as well as bequests. So relationship building is really important. We want to make sure that we're using this time. Check in on your donors. See how they're doing. Set up Zoom calls. Right now, I don't know about any of you, but I'm saving time on transportation. I'm saving time on all kinds of things. So it's a good time to kind of squeeze in some of those meetings. And also, people are really lonely. So there is an epidemic of loneliness that has been hitting our older people, and now it's hitting everybody else. So I think it's just really important to connect with people right now and be genuinely interested. It's a great way to keep up your donor relationships. While I switch slides, if anyone has any questions, feel free to jump in. Okay, so as I've been going through what the situation is, I've been telling you what you can do, but we're going to go over some more specifically. So communicate, 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 and you see this piece here all year long. So we have known and we've been recommending through this time period to increase our communication across all channels. And we were really suggesting, this was through Network for Good, that some cases where we double our communication. So if we were posting on Facebook once a week, do it daily. If it was daily, twice a day. We're really asking people as much as possible to keep their increased accelerated communication across all channels for the year. This is really, if you think about it, like that surge and the slump and the recovery that was in that earlier chart. I like to think of communication as holding onto the cart if it's a roller coaster and just riding it through. So it might take something to do that increased communication. I know an organization that's fantastic over Facebook, and then they struggle a little bit keeping up their other forms. You know, one of the things I said, can you just do a best of Facebook on Friday and email that out to everybody? And therefore you get the people who aren't on Facebook, or some people see it in two ways. I'm not asking you to reinvent the wheel. I'm not asking you to come up with a billion different stories in different places. It's more like communicating consistently across all channels. So if something's working in Facebook, bring it into your other channels. If something's working over email, tailor it to, you can create something that's visual and that works on Facebook. So, but it's really important right now. We're telling stories about our staff members, the people we serve, our missions. It's a good time to get personal. Take pictures of your staff at their, you know, take a screenshot of one of your Zoom calls and people working from home and what does that look like. This is a good chance for people to get to know us. And the other thing is, this is a really human moment. So, you know, we're seeing people's houses, we're seeing people make mistakes, people try things, and it's a good time for trying things. Even right now, you might hear my son laughing with my husband upstairs while we have this. uh, that's what this looks like right now for a lot of people. um, Anyone have any questions? Okay. All right, we're going to keep going. So ask, ask, ask. I think this is hard. I think that some organizations just ask all the time and they can't figure out how to be bothered having other communication with people. And I think other organizations just communicate, 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 and just feel horrible about asking. And we really want to find that balance between the two things. So if you're able to follow the fundraising plan you walked into your year with and do whatever you used to do, you know, I'd say go ahead, follow that plan. If you're not able to follow that, it's a moment to be flexible and to pivot and to really say, like, what can I be doing to get more resources here? One of the things that, because we don't know where we are in our surge, in our slump, in our recovery, how long it's going to take, it's important that you don't take your foot off the gas and let all the other organizations get in the fundraising resources and be missed out. One of the ways that I look at it is it's a disservice to our donors if we're not here when this crisis is over because we failed to ask. Um, that's not right for the people we serve, and that's not right for our donors. Many of us in this field, we go into this field wanting to be good people, wanting to support people. And so some of us, I think, struggle with anything that appears selfish. I know that I do as a business owner and coming from like a religious background. And so sometimes people just have trouble with the idea of asking. But as we talked about early on, there's some great ways to do it right now. Monthly giving is great. Planned giving is great. Major giving is great. Donor advice funds. And particularly if you're having conversations with people, if you're checking in with them, if you're calling them, if you're keeping up relationships, the ask should be a natural part of that. If you think of it, I always like the analogy, if you think of it like dating. So if you've been dating for a while, it starts to feel weird if you don't propose marriage, right? And the ask is like that marriage proposal. So just think about, have I been trailing someone along for a while and I'm not asking? That seems strange. So be a helper. So this is just something very specifically me, but I see one of the things that gets in the way of us asking is when this crisis is actually stopping us from doing some of our work and we don't know what to do. I think people are feeling stopped in a lot of ways. So the reason I think this is important is it gives us something to communicate about. I mean, for one thing, it's a moment we need helpers. We really do need them across our society. I was talking to an organization who actually had a pool of people who were set and ready to go when the crisis hit, and they couldn't do the work they were planned to do. And while the permanent staff were all being paid, this group of people were not being paid, and they didn't want to lose them by the time everything opened back up. And yet they had money, they had people, and they had no thing that they could do. And I was like, I bet there's a lot of things those people could be doing. I bet your community needs a lot. And I think it's just a matter of thinking flexibly beyond we can't do this one thing to there might be all different ways. And I like to use the example of an arts organization. Right now, arts organizations, there's a lot they can't do. Many of us have been seeing people come up with really creative ways to share the arts, and that's been really fun. But I also think if you've got a troupe of actors, you could send them out to be buying groceries for the elderly. You could have them cleaning up for people. You could have them running errands. So there's all different ways that we could be utilizing the people we know or utilizing our organizational infrastructure if we're thinking about how to be a helper. Any questions on that one? No. Okay, so let's talk about thanking. So think. This is really important. I don't know about all of you, but in some ways I feel like we have more time than ever to do this. We don't have that meeting we have to run out to, or we just click on Zoom and then we click back out of it and bam, we're out of the meeting. We don't have to drive anywhere. This is just so important. When we talk about donor relationships, we know that donor retention is generally pretty low across our whole sector. This is one of the things I think gets missed. I'm going to talk about it in the next slide, but I actually am advocating for a revamping in the way that we do this as organizations, as a sector. But thanking right now could look like a random phone call. Thanking should definitely look like our letters that have the tax information. But thanking can be shooting off a quick email to somebody. It could look like setting up a video call. I know an organization that just started individual giving for the first time ever. And so she just started calling up new donors that she just didn't know who they were. And she was like, oh, hey, so she called a $25 donor. And she found out this person had already created 2 podcast episodes about her organization and was planning to do a whole series. That's a $25 donor. If you were thinking about it in a structured way and you thought, well, I'm going to call these people, I'm not going to call these people, she would really never have known that. So again, it's a good moment to be flexible, not flexible as in drop your thanking, but flexible as in find cool and new interesting ways to thank people. Um, I know at Network for Good, they've got video messaging you can send out. There's a company called dub.com. You can send out video messaging. If you've got a YouTube channel, you might be able to send out some videos to people, linking it to that way. All different ways. But just let's think about how do we stay close to people? How do we feel connected? Ask people about their concerns, what's going on with them. It's great for donor research. And as you communicate with your donors, if you know what they're actually worried about, if you know what they're actually interested in, this is really helpful. Okay, any questions on that? No? Okay. I just rattling off information here. Oh, yes, one of my favorites. Ha 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 ha. Work on the integrity of
Are
your
you looking at me
systems.
when you say that?
So, the integrity of our systems. So, we have, I always find summer is a great time. Usually in the places that I've worked, a lot of the fundraising activity slows down because people are on vacation and they're doing different things. But that's really the external asking would slow down. And so internally, I would be busily updating my records, updating my systems, deduping, having one-on-one meetings with my major donors and my board members and asking them about who's on their list and has anyone moved and is there anything there? And then I'd be updating all of that stuff in the system. So when we got into the busier fundraising seasons into fall and year end, my data was much cleaner than it was when we went into it. And that's something I really would do every summer. For some of us, this feels a little bit like that. So sometimes we're stuck in, maybe there's things that we would normally do that we aren't able to do. It's just a good time to do some data cleanup. It's a good time to do some donor research. It's a good time to get to know some things and get that stuff in your database. So the next time you do a list pull, you can combine more pieces of criteria and come up with something a lot more interesting than if you were just send it out when you always send out. So it's a great time to look at segments. It's a great time to do testing, all of this stuff. Integrity, data, systems, my favorite things in the world. Start a major giving program or update whatever it is that you do. So for some people, they haven't done anything around major giving before. We're going to talk about this coming up, but major giving is really, it's just an advanced form of segmentation. You're taking people who typically give at a higher dollar amount, and you might be taking some people you think could give it that higher dollar amount, and you're just making sure you give those people more time and attention. That's the most simplistic version of a major giving program. And you can get complicated, and you can have structures, and you can have formal benefits, but really, the key is to have relationships with these people, have them know who you are, make sure you know who they are, keep good notes on them. If you have enough of them, after a while, you may know that person and love that person, but you might call their son by a different donor's son's name if you're not keeping good notes. They should feel like, you should feel similar to a very close relationship with that person. And so if you're making those kind of mistakes, that diminishes that. And so just having good records, keeping those notes in your database is really important. Anytime you pick up the phone and call, even if it's like left a message with so-and-so, or if you say, talk to them, they're really worried about their husband's business right now in the shutdown. That's all you got to put in there. That's really important information. That way, when it comes time for their ask, you can just know, oh, maybe I'm not going to ask them for an increase. I know they're going through a lot right now. So it's really, again, just an advanced form of segmentation, and it's relationship building. And like I said, if you're going to be randomly calling people, these are good people to start with. Particularly if people are making tough decisions right now and they're choosing, I'm only going to choose one organization to support, have yours be the one organization. That's what I'd really say. Okay. Donor retention is really donor stewardship. So this is a place I really want to talk about. I mentioned earlier that across our sector, lapsing of our donors and our inability to retain them from year to year is usually we retain about 40%. That means we're losing about 60% every year. And most organizations, if they don't dive into the data, don't notice this because they're gaining about an equal amount. Some people are increasing their gifts. And so it can look like the dollars are staying the same or even increasing every year, but really, if you could save even 10% of those people, keep half of your donors from year to year, that makes a difference. And so one of the things I want to talk about though is why I believe, and this is not yet data informed, I want to be doing some studies into this, but why I believe we lose our donors. And it's, I think, a lot because they don't feel like they have a relationship with the organization. We know that we're going to lose people because of job changes and moving and family dynamics. But that should, I think, only account for, say, 10, 20, maybe 30% at the most. Otherwise, people should feel like they're really hooked into the organization. And I think we don't orient ourselves as organizations in this way. So one of the ways to look at it is a lot of our activity is focused around donor acquisition and also, gaining gifts, getting those next gifts in. And we don't have a lot of activity that's really deeply focused on stewardship. It becomes kind of just part of the things we do in that fluster of activity. So, um, along those lines, I look at our staffing. The way most organizations are, kind of the lowest person on the totem pole is in charge of all the acknowledgement letters. Acknowledgement letters tend to be pretty dry and uninteresting. They don't help people know how to, they don't bring people closer to the organization. They just like acknowledge the stuff. They tell them stuff they already know. And we move on. We're all trying to get them out as quickly as we can. Um, we stop at this place of like sending out this paper. there isn't a lot there that's oriented towards relationship building. And I really think the development shops of the future, or if you look at the largest organizations like universities and hospitals and things like that, they have people who are dedicated to a lot of that relationship building, and those people are around major giving or alumni relationships or other kinds of grateful patient programs. And so I really think the rest of us as nonprofits need to look at how are we orienting our time and our staffing towards stewardship that retains 80% of our donors. What would that really look like? What would that be? And I don't have an answer to that yet, but I think this is where we need to be looking as organizations. So that's just my area of innovation minus facts. So thank you for joining us. You can see my email address and my LinkedIn on here. You can follow the Nonprofit Coach at thenonprofitcoach.guru.com. And I'm going to stop talking and I'm just going to open things up for questions.
Yeah, I don't have any specific questions, but it was very helpful, even just to have like a roadmap and marking things down. Oh, I need to do that. I need to do that. So I appreciate the information.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. I
That's
think.
great.
Oh,
I had a quick question on your
Yeah.
On the phone call with your pyramid. We were talking maybe about doing some sort of texting from Kid, like a text to give in the future.
Oh,
What do you think
yeah.
about that?
So right now, as I understand it, texts in general have like a 70% open rate, so they're pretty effective. It's also a great way to send out some video or any kind of urgent text. I know Network for Good has as a feature straight out of their database. I don't know about Little Green Light, but yeah, I think it's pretty effective right now, and it's great for immediate communication. So like today is your event, it'd be great to put something out that says like today would have been our event,
Yeah.
support us now. That would be a really good one. So yeah, absolutely. Other questions like that, and I can also stop recording if you want to have any other questions since it's just us.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone for joining. I'm going to stop recording.